Speak Up Africa is a digital platform that creates space for digital conversations to be made, specifically from end-to-end usage, from the users of the technological spaces, to the producers of it, to the creators, to the innovators, to the labor rights, to the policy increments, to governance, and all other technological dimensions. This is Speak Up Africa. I am Zaha Speaks. We inform, engage, and empower.
Elections may shape governments, but true democracy thrives in the years in between electoral cycles. So from what happens after the ballots are counted, to how do we hold our leaders accountable, to what do we do to them when they're not delivering the promises they gave us. This and so much more is to be debunked in this week's episode. And there is no better way I would have done it than having the KIDI MWAGA here with us, who is a lawyer, very vocal about matters, leadership, and governance. Let me give it to him to introduce himself. KIDI, how are you?
I'm fine, Wendy. Really nice seeing you again after the PDF. Certainly, I am the KIDI MWAGA, as you put it. I am, of course, a lawyer by training. I have had the good fortune to work extensively in the area of policy and governance. I am currently at the Kenya African National Union, otherwise known as KANU, where I man the desk on policy and legislative affairs. Beyond that, I work with young people as the convener Interparties Youth Forum, an entity that brings together young people from across the political divide and attempts to channel their imagination and intellect towards issues of common concern without paying undue attention to the short-term political nuances that might drive a wedge between us as young and amongst us as young people.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. It was really nice. And I think this conversation today has been fostered by our meeting during the People's Dialogue Forum.
Yes.
Yeah. And KIDI, very many people think civic education starts and stops during electoral periods, you know, when we are going to the ballots. But in between these voting cycles, actually the backbone of our governments are formed during this period. But I think a lot of us take in so much concentration during the electioneering period, which is a short period to just put people into office. But so much more happens after that. So what does democracy look like during voting cycles?
I think primarily we must appreciate that we must be cautious not to mistake electoralism with democracy. True and meaningful democracy actually gets its full meaning on what happens in between elections. Because over and above regular elections, then the health of a democracy is determined greatly by then what the people themselves, working in concert with the leadership they've elected, do in between election. Active citizenry is the critical first step. And what does that active citizenry look like? In our jurisdiction, Kenya, we, of course, have two levels of government. We have got the devolved governments and the national government. The devolved governments have what we call the CIDP at the beginning of every electoral term, County Integrated Development Plan, which then spells out the development priority needs within 5 years. So then every year it is broken down through the ADP, otherwise known as the Annual Development Plan. Then now that brings us to what is called public participation. You know that in the last 14 years since we enacted and gave ourselves this constitution, we have not gone ahead and enacted a law that then spells out what is public participation. So that public participation has been conducted haphazardly, but then sometimes even to justify very outrageous policy suggestions. So I think that a time has come that we must breathe life into that principle of governance contemplated in Article 10 of the Constitution called public participation, that what should it look like? What should happen? And we would say that we have met a threshold of public participation. Does the will of the people still guide the elected officials? Or the elected officials, based on their own greed, their own biases, and their own blind spots, choose to direct the policy formulation towards a certain direction that sometimes is at cross purposes with the needs and the will of the people. So I think public participation must remain a critical first step in how do we sustain democracy in between elections.
Great. And you've raised very pertinent issues, KIDI. And I appreciate the fact that we are among the young people who showed up at the People Dialogue Festival.
Yes.
And when I went there during the day one and I went to the youth village,
Yes.
KIDI, I was shocked and I was impressed.
Yes.
That young people are now in a space of awakening, that young people are being part of conversations and voices that matter, and contribute to these conversations. So having highlighted that and having talked about public participation, and the weight that it carries, what are the most practical ways that young people especially can stay involved and be in the know with political issues between periods where leaders are elected? What practical ways are there? We've seen public participation. You can tell me. I don't know if it truly works,
Yes.
And even if we show up in numbers, whatever we voice out, are they implemented? So just touch on some more on public participation, and then what other practical ways do we have for young people to stay in touch with government and policies?
I think most profoundly, what we have learned in the last 3 electoral terms now, since Jubilee 1 came in, and now we have what we call Kenya Kwanza. Those are the two regimes, administrations we've had since we enacted the new constitution. And one thing is that both regimes have demonstrated their disdain for constitutionalism. So then I think that one lesson we are learning is how political parties, to a great extent, have been captured and turned into special purpose vehicles, so that then they have become personal tools of quote-unquote party leaders who then can do whatever they deem fit and at no consequence at all.
I agree.
So that therefore behooves us as young people to evolve more intelligent means of political organizing and mobilizing that then trumps those political party identities, but then be able to still voice the voices of young people in the civic space. Now that is why where we come in with entities like Interparties Youth Forum, where we say that right now, Treasury is processing the BPS. As it is preparing the BPS as we head towards this preparing the finance bill, then as young people, we must be alert that what exactly is coming from Bima House, from Treasury. What is the priority areas for the government? Are we still going to put in money in renovation of state lodges and state house? Or are we going to put our money in the productive sectors of the economy? Because an economy is as good as one, what it produces, two, what it consumes, three, its capacity to engage, to deliver on mass prosperity. How are we able to build the productive capacity of our people so that as much as we are seeing shiny highways, shiny expressways, that we can still be able to have parents able to put a meal on the table for their children, a roof over their head, that these children are able to go to school, and that the promise of upward social mobility is still available to our people. So then I think that is where entities like Baraza Media Lab now coming in, partnering with interparties and other civic space actors to make sure that at all times we amplify the voices of ordinary people on the direction they want their country to go.
KIDI, as you speak, I'm cringing because it's almost exactly a year ago when people took matters into their own hands and we went to the streets. And again, both you and I.
And I remember seeing you in the streets.
Yeah, and I did interviews. And it even got to a place where my family was now getting very worried because for what greater good are you fighting the fight?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And it begs the question. Theoretically, we have systems that are put in place.
Yes.
What you're talking about, that inter-parties and inter-institutions should come together and keep amplifying the voices.
Yes.
But it begs the question, and then what? Because KIDI, if we take a very good statistics of some of the young people who took it to the streets, you know, and it formed a very good momentum and sensation, and we still keep saying we are still saddened of the lives that we lost during the protests. But if we make the follow-up questions of, do we really understand what happened? We said the finance bill should not pass, you know, and there was a whole momentum that was gained during that period. But do young people really understand what really happened? Was the finance bill passed? Was it not passed? And it has, a whole year has elapsed and we are in that period again. So we theoretically have systems, KIDI, but are they working? And number two, for the systems to work, how should we hold our leaders accountable to their actions? Because for us to go back home, there were a couple of promises that were made. You know, a few things will be amended. Things will be okay. We are still complaining. So the systems are there theoretically, but are they really working? And how should we hold our leaders accountable, especially as young people, for them to honor their word?
Wendy, to answer that question, primarily I must say that we are caught up in an carnivorous system that thrives in cannibalizing the lives of ordinary Kenyans. This system was put in place in pre-independence days in the colonial era, and successive Kenyan governments, supposedly under independence era, have sustained this system that then has continued to cannibalize our people. When we enacted the new and gave ourselves the new constitution, we thought that we had displaced that system. But to our dismay, is that this system was able to recreate and rebuild itself, and it has stayed with us. This system places opportunity, wealth, and power in the hands of so few at the expense of so many.
True.
So that today, as we speak, Wendy, you will agree with me that if we speak about joblessness, you almost would agree with me that it is a joblessness that is deliberate. It is deliberate because look at how what we call the Jubilee administration presided over our public finance system. It was with recklessness, it was with wastefulness, it was with corruption that shocks the conscience. When we young people in their wisdom mobilized around whoever had emerged as the voice of the alternative to that Jubilee wastefulness, called William Samoei Ruto, a year down the line, the young people were disappointed because William Ruto was unable to match his lofty, poetic campaign promises with the hard reality of governance. When he came in, the way, for instance, one of his signature promises was the Hustler Fund. The way Hustler Fund has been implemented, it is just another Fuliza that has gone to a group of schools.
Very, very wanting, to be honest.
Yes. If you look at the question of what we call SHA, Chief SHA, SHA, which was supposed to revolutionize access to healthcare has wrenched more pain amongst our people worse than NIF was the pain that we experienced under NIF. And when public officials have attempted to speak to us about this shift share, you get the impression of the four blind men who are the proverbial four blind men who attempted to tell a story about an elephant. Each one of them telling a different story.
True.
Because what the president says, what the former deputy president says, what the current deputy president says, what the previous minister for health said, what the current is completely at variance.
And exactly what is happening on the ground is totally different.
And you see the pain that is the people are going through. When as we speak, a medical officer has died at Kenyatta National Hospital, the very place where this young man used to work at. Because now when he fell sick, he was unable to access the healthcare that he used to offer, but that he now desperately needed. So then that now brings me to answering your question, that I think as young people, we have to now make peace with the fact that this country, as presently constituted, does not work. To sit back and hope that things will change is to be preposterously idealistic. That therefore brings me to the question then that what do we do? Where do we go from now? This is the year 2025. We've got a year into the elections. We must begin to vigorously mobilize ourselves and to evolve a viable alternative political vision. A political vision that must disrupt, and the operational word is must, disrupt the existing political order and usher in a new epoch, an epoch that shall ensure that we do not blot the government, thereby unnecessarily pushing up the cost of running government. We must have a government that is lean, that is efficient, that is capable of dealing with corruption, that is able to disrupt corruption networks, that is able to engage in wealth redistribution using the tax regime.
KIDI, when you speak, my emotions go all over the place because this is a facet of life that I'm very passionate about.
Yes.
And I don't know if that would be the right approach for us to wait until the next election comes for us to vote in the change that we are talking about.
Yes.
Because, KIDI, have we been able to track what the now government said we'll do? And if we've done that, have we brought them to account for their actions, their deeds, what they've done? You know, that we are now really looking forward to the next elections and making the change that we want to see. And as young people, KIDI, how well capable and able are we able to practically do it on the ground? Jukwa ground vitu saa ingine ni different, you know. Do we have the capacity? Do we have the financial muscle, you know? Because you and I both, you know, some of these systems are deeply rooted and they go way back in generations, you know. We've seen young people who've come up very, very wise, you know, very promising. But once they join the system, they just become part of the system.
They get co-opted.
You know, exactly. and for me, where we sit right now, I am really keen about talking into systems. And I will ask you again, so how do we hold our leaders accountable? Because, I mean, 2027 is coming, right? 2 years into it, we are there. But KIDI, have we done the best that we possibly could with this sitting government? For me, when I was going for the mandamanos, you know, I had my heart out because I was like, you know what? A time of change has come where if you are elected into office, I do not have to wait for general elections for you to get out. It has come to a time has come where I can hold you accountable for your actions. And if you are not delivering and performing, then we kick you out of office because then you're not delivering exactly what you said. But KIDI, if we sell and push the narrative that we should wait until 2027, do you think the ones who are sitting in office are not strategizing for that?
They are certainly strategizing, but then you realize that we are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. I say we are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea because the Constitution contemplates how the question of the transfer of power must be handled. And remember that any power that then is captured in a manner not contemplated in the Constitution is unconstitutional ab initio. So let us start from the Constitution. The Constitution envisages that elections shall happen every 5 years. So then the earliest chance we have to lay claim to power is in 2027. Anything in between, what we can do is disrupt as we mobilize. One, we've got members of the National Assembly who are a big letdown.
Absolutely.
Far much, people say that dark days of Kanu, but under Kenya Kwanza and Jubilee, we have seen much more dark days.
Yeah.
Because at least under Kanu and under President Moi, I think there was a respect for parliament. Today, we have PGs being held in State House, which is in itself a violation of a sacred place of our democracy, a violation of the sacred sanctum of our democracy. Because when you hold PG in State House, you are meeting with members of a partisan political formation. So then it means that what you are showing people who are not part of that agenda is that we will use the instruments of violence donated to us by the people to push our political agenda.
Yeah.
So one, we must find ways on how to teach our elected members, particularly members of parliament, the fear of the Lord. That teaching them that fear of the Lord must start by making sure that we subject them under fierce scrutiny, the projects that they are doing. The ones that are playing around and their best talent is to become members of the orchestra of the praise and worship.
Yeah.
We must make it difficult for them to even tour their constituencies. We must make them so unpopular. We must be able, as young people, to find a suitable replacement for them. We must help such replacements to tour the constituency and to take their messages to within all the four corners of each constituency. So that coming 2027, if no political party shall be able to grant these young people the ticket to run, let us be able to have our own parties as young people.
True.
Or politically friendly political parties to have these young people run on these political parties. But also there is the option of running as independent. But as someone who has worked in political parties, it is easier to lobby government because we must get into this conversation, not from an emotional standpoint. We must know that it is easier to lobby government when you come from a political party. So yes, our primary responsibility is to make sure that the MPs who have let the people down, beginning with the parliamentary leadership, you have the leader of majority, you have got the majority whip, you have got the chair of budget committee, you have got those leadership. We must remember their faces and we must teach them the fear of the Lord.
Okay. A few pertinent issues have been raised
Yes.
in this conversation. And our episode today says it, what happens beyond the ballot box,
Yes.
you know. And as young people, there's a big need to understand the role of civic education.
Yes.
And I appreciate the forums we have shared with you, both
Yes.
virtually and physically,
Yes.
where we are being part of conversations that matter.
Yes.
And these conversations will cause the disruption
Yes.
that you are talking about
Yes.
as we mobilize
Yes.
and gain momentum to
Yes.
2027.
Yes.
And I pushed that so that you could raise that pertinent issue because therefore it sheds more light and it brings better understanding.
Yes.
So as we get involved in these conversations, and I rally most young people that this is the time, KIDI. This
Yes.
is the time to amplify your voice and be part of the change you want to see. You are actually the change that we need and we want to see.
Thank
so
you.
civic education plays a very big role you
Yes.
know. So how do we incorporate this in our daily lives, because I think for me, an important place of civic education is in between the cycles that we are talking about.
Yes.
That is, it is in this period of time that we need people to be educated,
Yes.
to understand what your rights are and what your needs are. Because, KIDI, the way you're saying, you go back to the village, and better part of last year I was working at a health facility all the way out in Kisumu on your way to Maseno. And the numbers really did change when we moved from NHIF to Shifsha.
Yes.
Number one, there was no understanding of actually what is this SHIF and SHA and how are we even moving forward. So all this intertwined to civic education. Let's not lose the thought of train of thought. So we are given a date that after 31st, it's no longer NHIF and SHIF and SHA comes in.
Yes.
Do you know?
And at some point we call it Taifa Care.
Yeah. And KIDI, it was sad to see, like where I was working, the maternity wing went from having about 120, 200 women a month to 0.
Yes.
And then with a bit of mobilization, we moved to maybe 15.
Yes.
And this just showed me that lack of information and access to education and civic education at large brings and instills fear to people.
Yes.
And when this fear is brought to you, you cannot distinguish what is your right and what is your responsibility. So when your member of parliament comes and gives you handouts of 200 bob, it looks like it's a privilege, or that this person X has really worked hard, they've brought us a few shillings here and there, but that is not the way it should be done. If people had enough information, they would know what to demand for, because access to health is a right for every citizen in this country, So what role does civic education play, and how do we make it a reality for the young people, even as we get the momentum and the disruption and mobilization towards 2027?
The place of civic education is primarily one to place a material dent on political ignorance. And the political ignorance manifests itself in this manner, that young people sometimes think that voting is enough, that after voting, they fold their arms, they close their ears, and then they go to slumber and hope that the government or the people that they've elected will go fight for them and bring back the results to them.
True.
One thing they forget is that all actors, as we always know, are self-interested. And there's some of them go into public spaces and public service, not because they love the people so much, but in pursuit of their own selfish interest. So they go in, they make deals, they enrich themselves, and they forget the people. For instance, we have been told that the affordable housing program has ostensibly employed, 100,000 plus. I will tell you, my sister Wendy, if you do a proper audit, then the affordable housing program, I don't think, has employed more than 20,000 Kenyans. But then we would have excused President William Ruto that the affordable housing, because both sides of the political divide proposed it, depending on where the country was, we needed programs that were going to spur liquidity in the economy. The affordable housing program has failed to spur liquidity in the economy.
True.
If you look at the economic hardship among the populace, if you look at the level of human suffering, then affordable housing, the only thing it might, and I'm using that word very deliberately, it might cure is the housing conundrum, particularly in informal settlements. But the question of liquidity, it has failed completely. And even in answering the question of housing, the way it is being implemented is still very controversial. Controversial because a lot of people are forced to pay for it. Yet they don't stand a real chance of being beneficiaries
of those projects.
Yet these are people who are also pay other taxes to government, hoping that government will utilize their taxes to do such things, to offer such public goods that it has, like housing, when it has chosen to deliver on such. So I think that the place of civic education must remain that as young people, we must remain vigilant, we must remain politically informed, we must remain active citizens, we must be in a place where we are able to subject our elected officials under intense scrutiny. And maybe that scrutiny, sustained scrutiny, will make our elected leaders want to do what is just and right, to hold the government accountable, to become true representative of the people, credible representatives of the people, to become dependable negotiators of power. Because you see, when you go, like now, the budget process is running its course. It is only shrewd negotiators that will be able to get the government to allocate projects in their constituencies. And then the question of priority. So then when you are a shrewd, dependable negotiator, then you are able to figure out that what is our priority as a country? Can we get the government to invest in these priority areas? And can we fight government from parliament from implementing in areas that do not bring benefit to our people? For instance, let me give you an example. Imagine in the last financial year, the ending financial year, in that finance bill, we proposed that we remove VAT on those who are importing choppers. While at the same time, we were sad, and you see people who can buy choppers are the 5% who are messing up this economy.
True.
While the ordinary people, the 90% who are struggling to get a food on the table, to get a roof for their head, to get education for the mind of their children, the government was introducing 200 new taxes for them. That is a system we need to disrupt. And we are going to disrupt it when we are able to engage in sustained civic education.
Great. As we wrap up the conversation, do you think the lack of proper civic education in the recent past, because it's true, we are in a period of a new awakening, do you think the lack of proper civic education has been deliberate, KIDI? That leaders know what power lies in the masses, and they understand if we give you the power by educating you, you will, number one, do the things we are talking about, hold us accountable, know what is your right and what is your privilege, Do you think they have been deliberately withholding civic education from us?
I am tempted to answer in the affirmative, because certainly yes. I want us to look at 2013, 2017. 2013, 2017, there was a proper demarcation of who was in government and who was outside the government. For those who are outside the government, they were the alternative vision. Those days we used to have KOD, which was the largest political coalition that was outside the government. So KOD at some point then joined forces with what was called the Amani Coalition, and then they transitioned to NASA. So in 2013, 2017, when Uhuru was borrowing massively, we had people calling him out on the Eurobond. When we felt that IEBC was too compromised to preside over a credible election, we engaged in IEBC must go. And even as we were getting in 2017, the question of electoral justice was part of our political discourse. So after 2018, we had got this rapprochement that then effectively killed political civic education in this country. Because one, everyone who was holding a political alternative thought was then labeled names. And that name calling is something we must stop. But even if it does not end, the rest of us who are willing to speak must be ready and willing and courageous to confront it and face it and, endure it. Because what happens is that from 2018 to 2022, we did not raise a voice on the question of electoral justice until we got to 2022 and Cherera 4 happened. And then we went to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court called us bad names, hot air, and other names that I don't want to dignify by repeating. So that is when we remember the question of electoral justice. So again, we ran back to the streets saying, Fungua Sava. So then Fungua Sava then now became a rallying call, and then we remember that, let us also remember, add the icing on the cake by saying the cost of living. Then today, we are in government and nobody's talking about the cost of living. In the last 2 years, the police have turned the instruments of the monopoly of violence we have donated to them to kill our own people.
True.
We killed our own people in 2023. We killed our own people in 2024. So then nobody is talking properly about the question of compensating the victims of police brutality. Nobody is talking about the high cost of living that is denying our people the dignity. Nobody is speaking about the massive taxation that is making it difficult for our people to have a roof over their head and a meal on their table. So then I think that because those who wield power have deliberately made sure that we are not in a position to speak coherently to some of these issues, it is now incumbent upon us to above everything else, properly agenda set. Let us know in the first quarter as the first quarter of 2025 is coming to a close, what are our issues? As you're speaking here, we've had some young people out there who are demonstrating about lack of jobs, joblessness. I think that we have got other young people going to court to challenge the IBC selection process. I think let us agenda set, let us synergize, let us collaborate, let us confront this evil satanic system that is holding our people back and denying them dignity in their own country.
Great.
Yes.
KIDI, thank you so much. Sadly, I will have to wrap it up there, but I hope you will be back here with us so that we can continue debunking and unpacking some of these issues so that we are also able to educate and empower some of the young people who are out there. Because even as you were speaking, I was thinking about how exactly a year ago we went to the streets, we were leaderless, we were tribeless, we were all that, you know. But a friend of mine asked me, so we lost momentum because I think at some point it was easier to disrupt the momentum because what was the structure, you know, where were we going? And I think it's important that you have said we need to agenda set, we need to have the goals put in place, and therefore that can be able to guide our path. Thank you so much for listening in today. This is Speak Up Africa, where we engage ourselves in civic matters and bring you the platforms and opportunities to amplify your voices. And the best way you can do that is by subscribing. Be part of this conversation, you know, comment, tell us who would you want us to bring here and have conversations. KIDI, thank you so much for being here and speaking to us. Let me just give you 30 seconds to give us your parting shot. Where can we find you? How should we and how can we be part of these conversations? And then we call it a day.
Thank you, Wendy. For Christians, and I'm sorry for my non-Christian viewers, the good book says that in the year that King Uzziah died, Isaiah saw the Lord. In the year 2024, when the young people of this country stormed Parliament and took away the mess, which is the authority of parliament, it set this country in a revolutionary mode. And the country remains, must remain, is in that mood all the way to 2027. I believe that we must make sure that we bring that revolution to conclusion through constitutional means. We must make sure that we do not slacken, that we do not get distracted, that we do not get co-opted. A lot of our young people already, have been co-opted.
True.
Some are speaking for government. Some have gone in bed with the would-be oppressors, but who lack opportunity to plunder. Because, people in the opposition, there is not one of them you'd look at and say that I would trust this with my future.
Yeah.
So that is why it is incumbent upon us, the young people, to evolve a new alternative political vision that this country can rally around and that the young people can support. What President Obama would call a change you can believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. Young people, we are the change we want to see. So much needs to be done. So much needs to be implemented. And the power is with us. We really have the power to change the evil that is there in our leadership and governance spaces. My name is Wendy Lois. Thank you so much for being at Speak Up Africa. We will see you in our next episode. Thank you.
Speak Up Africa is a digital platform that creates space for digital conversations to be made, specifically from end-to-end usage, from the users of the technological spaces, to the producers of it, to the creators, to the innovators, to the laborites, to the policy increments, to governance, and all other technological dimensions. This is Speak Up Africa. I am Zaha Speaks. We inform, engage, and empower.